Hello, Epic Understanding family. I am amazingly excited to bring you our guest tonight. Really, this is the second time she has been with us, and she is talking with us and educating us on how to transfer our wealth legally. That's really what she's doing. And she's a brilliant attorney, but that is not why I like her. I like her and I appreciate her because she cares so much about the community. She cares so much about her clients, and she does her very best to give them sound advice and advice that she might even give her family members. So that is why I'm excited about her. Hello there, Max Elliott. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to share the information that I think is really important for everyone to have.
It is. You know what? Tonight we're going to talk about wills and trust. And I must tell you, I truly wish that I had learned about how accessible a trust is for the average Joe and how much good it would do the average Joe. Because you kind of think about those things at a higher level and not
Right.
think about it for, the middle class or even quite honestly, someone who came from a family of poverty. It will still help you.
Yeah, exactly. And um, I think before we get, and I'm happy to talk about trust. Oh, I talk about it all the time. But I do want to kind of touch on wills
Yes.
because people don't realize exactly how important they are, and they're driven by state law. So it's really important to have your intentions, your fiduciaries, also known as an executor, and actually define who your family is. Because once again, a last will and testament is driven by state law. And as long as you set out who you want to inherit from you, it doesn't necessarily have to be next of kin. It could be cousins, nieces, aunts, it could be friends, but you need to actually establish that. And there are two critical components with respect to last wills and testaments, especially for parents and parents with minor children. If you have a minor child and unfortunately you pass away, a will is the only instrument by which you can nominate who is going to take care of your child in the event of your death. And it's really important. This is known that the fiduciary is known as guardian, as a guardian. It's a guardian of the minor, unlike the guardianship we talked about last time. But
Hmm.
this guardian is you can put in provisions that allow folks to state whether the child can live with the guardian or whether the guardian should live with the child. Sometimes family is not in the same jurisdiction, and so because a will is driven by state law, the guardianship provisions then are driven by state law, and you can stipulate that yes, I am giving authority for the guardian to actually remove my child from the state in which they reside. These provisions are so critical because we tend to think, oh, my grandma take care of him, or my sister will take care of it, care of my child. But will they? Will they in the way that you would? Do they share your values in terms of education, in terms of faith, in terms of all of these other things that we don't necessarily think about? So I think, like I said, that's why I wanted to kind of start at the beginning because this is like extraordinarily important, especially when we have so many families who are raising children, even grandmothers, right? Grandmothers are raising children, but they may not have a will in place. It's like, grandma, wait, wait, you actually
Mm-hmm.
need to do this. And then the other component is at the end, it's like it's the only instrument by which one can dictate what your disposition of remains are. And we've all unfortunately seen those family feuds at funerals, right? And
Yes.
so so this instrument allows you to stipulate who's going to actually handle the memorial services, if any, how it's going to be paid, so you don't have to pass the hat, in front of the casket. Um, so I mean, and even if you don't have to have maybe what your family wants. There are interesting things going on. And so you can actually state what you want, and your executor is legally bound by
Mm-hmm.
that. Okay. And so, yeah, so it's really, really important. I've had folks say, well, okay, I don't really trust anybody with my obituary. Can I add my obituary to my last will and testament? Yes, you can. And then your executor cannot deviate from the prototype that's in your last will and testament. Now, if you change some things, you may want to also change your last will and testament. But yeah, so I just wanted to point that out.
That is so important. Wait a minute, turn me down just a little bit.
Okay.
But what you said is so important, is particularly about the children. Hello out there, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I just want to say we are here with attorney Max Elliott, and she is talking about wills and trust. And she started us out at the beginning. She wanted us to get the very basics down, and I like where she started at with children. And as you were talking,
Hmm.
I really began to look at a will as not my last will and testament, even though that's what it is. But really, it's not a death document for me. It is a live document for how I want my legacy, my things, the people I'm responsible for, how I want those things to live on. So I am giving direction.
Exactly.
That's really what it
Exactly.
is.
Yeah, exactly. It's very important. It is, like I said, it's driven by state law. It's the only instrument by which, if you have children, you can designate who's going to take care of your children in the unfortunate event of your death. And with that, you can lay out as broadly or as narrowly the authority for those guardians. It's also, if you have a modest estate, if you don't need a trust, but like I said, we'll talk about it later, you can still designate who gets what, when, and how. And it is legally binding. There are some there are some professionals who actually have wills and trusts inside of their wills, but they only have a will. They don't even have a trust. It's inside of the will, so the trust is not effective until they die. And the reason for this is, for example, in Illinois and New York and most other jurisdictions, there's a period of time after someone passes away whereby a creditor can place a claim on the estate. And so we
Mm.
call that the creditor claim period. If all you have is a will, then once that will is entered into probate, and we kind of don't want that, but and sometimes you do, and I'm going to tell you why. Because that 6-month creditor claim period is basically the only time whereby somebody can actually place a claim on the estate. So think about it. If you're a doctor, if you're if you're an individual in a very, let's say, in a profession or a career where folks tend to like to sue you,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately you pass away, they only have 6 months to place a claim on your estate. So if you're a physician and you have some nefarious, someone who didn't like your bedside manner, they only have 6 months by which to place a malpractice claim or something of that. After 6 months, they can't do anything. If there is someone who thinks that they are an heir, they only have 6 months. And after that, they can't do it. So a will also protects, in that way, it kind of protects the family with probate. So sometimes it's a good thing, but it protects the family from outsiders and from a dissipation of assets.
So when you have a will, does it automatically go to probate still?
No. So that's the that it's really interesting. It doesn't. In Illinois, your estate has to exceed $100,000 in personal property, or you have to have real estate that is owned outright, that there's no joint tenant or no tenant by the entirety or tenant in common holding the property with you jointly. Then you go to probate. However, there are some people who have in excess of $100,000. They know that their estate is going to go into probate, and they actually want it because they want that 6-month creditor claim period to start totaling. And then after that, nobody can lay a hand on their estate. That's why some people have trusts, like I said, included in a will to get that statute of limitations tolling. And if you kind of think about it, if you're very affluent, that might actually be better for you. But I typically tell people you want to avoid probate. So if you don't have, like I said, if your personal property does not exceed $100,000, or if you have folks designated as beneficiaries on things, then probate will not be triggered. But the will still has to be filed. It still has to be filed with the clerk of the court of the county in which one dies, in the decedent's county. And in that regard, which is why trusts are often more they're often more desired, is because that will is filed, it becomes available to anybody to see. All you have to do is go down to the county clerk's office and give them the name and the date of death, basically the name, and you can actually, look at the will, make a copy, and know exactly what was in the estate if it's not a pour over will. So,
yeah. Oh my goodness, it can be quite complicated.
Somebody just said that to me the other day. Yeah, it can be. There are a lot of components to estate planning. A lot of things that people have to think about, but that's why I'm here, to try and help folks kind of understand what is involved. So for me, it's just like, if you have kids, if you have a minor child, you need a will. If you have chosen family, or if you have family whereby you all might disagree on your disposition of remains or something, you need a will. So let's just get that out there.
So you know what? Let's just take the lid off. It's quite common for family members to not have the exact same ideas about how things should go.
Mm-hmm.
Some people all of a sudden believe in cremation, and no one in their whole family has ever been cremated. But if you really want that, you've got to put it in writing.
You have to put it in writing. You have to state it in your will. If you don't put it in writing, then the laws of the state will take over. And so if you don't have an executor, then your next of kin gets to decide what happens. And like you said, sometimes we disagree with what were long-standing family traditions, and we're like, no, I want to be cremated. and I want my ashes to be placed in a pod under a tree. That's what I want, right? And mother is like, what do you mean? We have a plot, right? And but no, this is what I want. So that's what you want. You need to put it in writing, put it in a will.
That's
Exactly.
amazing.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a trust, do you automatically have to have a will, or can you have a trust as a standalone?
You can, okay. So let's kind of talk about what a trust is. There are so many, there are dozens of types of trust. So I'm going to stick with the kind of main, the main type, the regular type. So a trust is a probate avoidance mechanism. A revocable living trust, some people say revocable, I say revocable, but it is a probate avoidance mechanism.
Okay.
It's a probate avoidance mechanism because whatever property that you own, if you have the right attorney, that attorney will title that property or help you to title that property to your trust. That's called trust funding. Once property is titled to a trust is kind of like, if you think about it, it's like just a person standing here and saying, give me everything that you have, and you give it to that person, and it's like, great, when you pass away, I will then give it back to whomever, I will distribute it to whomever you want me to distribute it to, as opposed to a will, which is not a person. It's like, it's a pot that sits with the state, and you say, okay, everything that I want is going into this pot, and if it's more than $100,000, the state will say, okay, let's take this pot and take it to court and go to probate. So that's kind of the difference. And so a trust, like I said, avoids probate. You can title almost anything that you have to a trust. There are things that shouldn't be titled to trusts, such as businesses, such as income property. But generally,
Why? Why would you want to do that?
okay, that's a good question. So a trust it's a revocable living trust. Revocable means that it can be changed. Living during your lifetime. It is keyed to your social security number. You put your family residence, and that's exactly what you do so you can avoid probate. Title your family residence to your trust. Title your bank accounts. If you don't have a designated beneficiary, then your trust becomes the beneficiary. And so let's say, and let's say you own some rental income property. On your income property, you have an umbrella policy to take care of, a potential lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say somebody slips and falls and is unfortunately injured, seriously injured, and for the rest of their lives. That $1 million in umbrella insurance policy is not going to satisfy that person's needs. If your building is titled to your trust, which is key to your social security number, that litigant gets everything you own for as long as you have that social security number.
Okay.
So you keep your building, your income property separate so that if there is a slip and fall, that's all that they get. They can't reach and get your home, right? The house that you live in, your bank account, that is off limits. The only thing that they would be able to attach to is that property. That's why we do not place income properties in trusts.
So, can a person have more than one trust?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, so, like, yeah, you should know that. So a revocable living trust, often, especially with families, you often have a number of trusts kind of like inside of it. So if you think of a revocable living trust, like I'm a person here, I'm your trust. Well, I have this hand, so we can have something in this hand, we can have something in this hand, and you know what? I got feet too, so we can put something in my feet as
Okay.
well. So you kind of think about it. There's sub-trusts. If you have children, let's say you have a couple of children, right? And you want to provide for their education, you want to make sure that they have good stewardship with respect to the inheritance that you would leave them. You would have a trust set up for them.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say you are married, right? And if you're married, then the IRS allows you to create what's called a marital deduction trust that allows your spouse to inherit from you without having to pay taxes on that inheritance. And so you'll have a marital deduction trust as well. And
Okay.
so when you pass away, your trustee will assemble, and what we call it marshal. They will marshal all of your assets and just divide the assets up per your intentions with respect to the various trusts. So sometimes you'd say, okay, I want 75% to go to my spouse, and then the balance to my children, because my spouse will probably take care of my children. So let's just make sure that 25% is in the trust for my children to take care of their education.
So, can you leave life insurance to your trust? And is that a good idea?
It is a good idea, and it's really interesting. I think it's one of the things that we don't think about enough. And what it is your life insurance. You make your life insurance actually. The trust is a beneficiary of your life insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
In so doing, you can actually fund the education of children, of grandchildren. You can actually pay off mortgages, right? You can remove debt that family members would otherwise incur just by having life insurance titled, life insurance that's a trust that's a beneficiary of your life insurance policy. It's like I said, it's one of those things that we don't think about often.
I've been
That
thinking
is
about it.
yeah. It's kind of it's really interesting because, like I said, you don't. It's not that you may be working and receiving an income that helps you take care of your home, you take care of your family, and then you also may and should have an insurance policy.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know what's going to happen. We can't predict what's going to happen. But if you have a permanent insurance policy as opposed to term, but you can
Mm-hmm.
use term as well. But if you have a permanent insurance policy, upon retirement, you get those cash proceeds, right? You get the cash benefit. But then upon your death, there are also those death proceeds, those death benefits that are sitting there that, like I said, you can fund a grandchild's education. You can pay off your kid's mortgage. You can, your spouse can pay off the mortgage for the house. There's just so much that can be done to ease the burden of the current family or the next generation. And this is the first time, I think you and I talked about this last time, this is the first time in history where there is actually the ability to transfer wealth inside the communities of color, right? Inside the African American community. And one of the ways you transfer wealth is not just by using the wealth that you have, but by using benefits such as life insurance, such as retirement assets, to minimize or even eliminate the debt for your family upon your passing, your immediate family upon your passing, or to actually lay a foundation
Yes.
for your grandchildren and a legacy so that they don't have to worry about student loans. They don't have to worry about a mortgage because your life insurance policy just paid for that.
And so that I'm on the right page, that money can still accumulate interest.
Yes, exactly. And so that's why we say, especially with respect to permanent, also known as whole life insurance, you don't place the policy inside the trust because upon your passing, a trust is taxed. So you don't want to do that. You allow it to grow inside its own vehicle. Life insurance policy, it will grow, and you just allow it to grow and accumulate tax-free that interest. And then upon your passing, the trust becomes a beneficiary, and your trustee takes it and does what you have determined should be done with it. Pay a child's education, maybe place it inside a trust, an educational trust for a child, whereby the income especially gets distributed out on an annual or semester basis.
Yeah.
So that income is not taxed, right?
So
I'm not a tax attorney, but I have to know these things with respect to estate planning.
yes. So can a trust be used like a bank? I'll give you a scenario. Um, I have passed away and I had a $2 million life insurance policy, and now this money is available. And I have in my will that any family member can borrow money interest free as long as they pay it back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the what you're kind of referring to are it's really kind of interesting, are like family banks, family
Yes.
offices. Like 100 years ago, this is exactly what very affluent families did. They took this is the old savings and loan, basically, right? That's how the old Harris Trust, I'm dating myself, but there was a Harris Trust, savings and loan. This is actually kind of how those trust savings and loans start. You get insurance, you place it in trust, and you allow a family member, you have to actually, document it. And you can waive the interest. You can actually have the estate pay the interest so they don't have to, and it's a gift to them, right? But they can borrow it as long as, they do pay it back. And sometimes you might ask for them to pay it back with interest, especially if you're a family office or something of that nature. And then if they're paying it back with interest, then that actually increases the principal, right? Eventually it increases the principal for the other generations to come.
And
Oh
I
yeah.
really agree with that. You know what? It no one in your family will pay a lot for money, is my point. Because that money is the most expensive thing that we pay for.
Exactly. It's the adage, time value money, right?
Mhm.
Money money is expensive. The more the further out you go, the more expensive money becomes. Uh, so you do, in essence, want to conserve the principle and create, like I said, help create that foundation. So much can be done with life insurance, so much can be done with trusts. But people have different ideas, right? Because there are some people who say, that sounds like I'm kind of reaching from the grave, telling my children what they can and cannot do and what they can and cannot spend and so forth. And it's up to you. It's the individual's choice. But again, to me, it's a great way to provide stewardship to the younger generation. You don't want to give them 100, $200,000 in a lump sum at the age of 18, at the age of 25. Our brains are just developed at the age of 25. So that it doesn't make any sense. Instead, allow for staggered distributions so that the trustee can observe and actually kind of teach the younger child, your child, how to manage their money. Hopefully you're doing it during your lifetime. But in case of premature death, then you'll have somebody to be able to do that. And it's very important. And that way, folks aren't wasteful. It's amazing the wealth that can be built just by teaching family members how to use the assets that we have wisely, because they will start to create habits and develop habits that not only save money that belongs to the family, but save money for themselves as well. And that creates wealth also. Um,
I'm just looking at this in a really powerful way. Just imagine if you had a mom and a dad, and both of them had $2 million policies with two kids. Okay, eventually they will pass on. Um, those children will want to buy cars, houses, all of these different things, and those children will most likely have grandchildren. They would have created $4 million in assets for their generations to go ahead. And those family members will never have to borrow money for a house, never have to borrow money for a car, never have to borrow money for their
education.
children's college, their education in any way. And whatever they decide to do, whether it's technical school or, you know,
Right.
going to
Exactly.
school to be a doctor, they will never, ever, ever have to pay the standard interest rate for that, you know, education. And
Exactly.
that is freedom.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and just with that, right? Just with insurance, and we're not even talking about the fact that there are retirement interests, right?
Mhm.
A family, a nuclear family, or three member family, we're they don't have to use their retirement interests.
Mhm.
They can enjoy their retirement, understanding that this life insurance that we have is going to provide for our family. We
Mhm.
just need to create provisions to make sure that the children don't get too happy with the inheritance that they have. And the
Well, that's why we have the trust, because it has provisions. Let's make that
right. Well, some people don't. Some people, it's really interesting. Some people are like, no, let's just give it to them all. Give it to them,
mm,
give all of it to them at the age of 25. And I can tell you,
that's
there
unwise.
are so many stories. There are so many stories about how wealth is diminished instantly when children inherit large sums of money at a relatively young age. A lot of people say 25 is not young. Yes, it is to inherit six figures, even sometimes $50,000. That's a lot of money to be putting into the hands of someone whose brain has just developed and
Yeah, I was
just
just about to say the frontal lobe fully develops at 25, and they haven't practiced using it yet. So
right?
give
Exactly.
them some time.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. They need some time. And so, that you can give the trustee discretion. The trustee can have discretion to distribute the funds, when they think that, this kid is on it. Wow, they're doing well in school, or they've started this amazing business and they're really taking off. We can loosen the purse strings a little bit. Or the converse, needs a little bit more guidance for a little bit longer. We can also do that. Um, One thing that's really interesting, I kind of want to go back to retirement interest. Um, a lot of people, other than the home, retirement accounts, well, pre-pandemic, retirement accounts were the largest, like I said, other than the home, the largest asset that most people own. And before the pandemic, especially before 2019, one could actually leave your retirement interest to your children and allow them to stretch it out over their lifetime. In 2019, in December of 2019, the Secure Act, setting every community up for retirement enhancement law, was passed, and it eliminated that ability for non-spousal beneficiaries.
Oh, wow.
It's yeah, it's set up a few categories that are exempt from that. Children is one category, but only until that child is 18. And then after 18, the 10-year rule, which now applies to everybody else, the 10-year rule kicks in, where that child has to withdraw all of that money within a 10-year span. So we were just talking about 25-year-olds. Think about if, unfortunately somebody, a parent died and had $200,000 worth of retirement interest and life insurance, and they died, and the child is, let's say, let's say 18 or 17, right? Over 10 years, that child gets all of that, unless you have a trust set up for that child.
You want to know something? I just realized that I really need to have you on with an accountant, or because what popped in my mind is, what if there's an annuity? Can a trust own an annuity? And how does that work? Because it
Right.
because it would seem to me that if I had someone very young, the annuity, could, pay them out a little bit at a time at certain
Hmm.
increments.
Well, remember at the beginning when we started talking about trust, I said there are like dozens of trusts for folks who are very affluent. And I mean, they have like $2 million liquid. So $2 million liquid does not include one's home or
Mhm.
cars or retirement interest, right? So they have $2 million sitting out there. That's exactly what they create with that $2 million. or
I
more.
see.
They create what's called a grantor retained annuity trust.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is that it does exactly that. It allows the trustee to distribute income over a certain period of time so that inheritance is not taxed. Now, $2 million is kind of small. This is usually where you have a taxable estate. So we're talking millions of dollars. We're talking like 25 million dollars. But it's still an annuity. And you can still do that with $2 million, with whatever kind of liquid that you have. Because if you think about it, with $2 million, if you put $2 million in the bank, it's going to garner interest. People can live off of that interest by
Yeah.
itself. That's why most financial planners suggest that if you're looking to retire, that's about the amount that you want in terms of liquid. Have $2 million available in retirement assets, you're fine. You can live off of the interest for a while. So you can do a lot with trust in terms of just setting up. We've set up schedules for children distributions, and like I said, it provides them with stewardship and guidance and eliminates debt. They don't have to worrying about paying for vocational school. They don't have to worry about paying college education. They don't have to worry about paying a mortgage. Um, it's just an amazing mechanism
Mm-hmm.
for building wealth. One of the other one of the other aspects of a trust, because it is, especially a revocable living trust,
Mm-hmm.
it is used during one's lifetime, is that if you become incapacitated,
Mm-hmm.
you're the beneficiary. During your lifetime, you are the beneficiary, not your children. They are remainder beneficiaries, not your spouse. They are remainder beneficiaries during your lifetime because it's key to your social security number. You are the beneficiary. So
Okay.
if you become incapacitated, your successor trustee steps in and uses those assets to take care of you. And so if you have children, you will have provision stating, continue to fund the trust for my children, but do not jeopardize my care. Just make sure that I'm comfortable, and then continue to gift and take care of my children, depending on what age you are. So it's one of those instruments that's just, like I said, very powerful, very, very important to have. Uh, it starts off as a probate avoidance mechanism, and after that, it's a wealth building mechanism as well.
And that's really how I look at it, as a wealth building tool. Okay, so I have a different question. Actually, I have several, but
Understood.
I want to step back a little bit, and
Mhm.
I want us to make this really, really um, small. Because what if I'm, a minimum wage worker? Okay, I want us to help that person understand why a trust would be good for them. And for me, I couple it with life insurance. Let me get this part out before you answer. However much money you can afford in life insurance per month is
Mhm.
exactly how much you can put towards the future generation. So if I'm a minimum wage worker,
Mhm.
and I can only afford to get a life insurance policy that is worth
Mhm.
$50,000,
Mhm.
I still just changed my children's life for the next generation. I still just did that. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
$50,000, even on minimum wage, if you're young enough, I will say,
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
not a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
per month. I mean, literally, if I'm not mistaken, you can get it like $10 a month if you're young enough. If you're
Mm-hmm.
young enough.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I'm coupling a lower wage worker with someone really young, because even if you have worked in um, a frontline worker kind of job, or a grocery store
Cashier.
kind of job,
Mm-hmm.
cashier,
Mm-hmm.
something like that. Even
Mm-hmm.
if
Been
you're
there.
older, if you're older, you've done it a number of years, so you're no longer right at minimum wage. You're at least a few dollars ahead of
Mm-hmm.
minimum wage.
Mm-hmm.
So time plus money still equals more money, when you're at
Mm-hmm.
that kind of
Mm-hmm.
when you're
Mm-hmm.
at that level.
Yeah. I think there are a number, I guess there are a number of factors that come into play. Um, Maslow's hierarchy is the first one. So,
Yeah.
right, it's like food, shelter, clothing for that minimum wage worker to make sure that they're able to sustain themselves. Because if you're at minimum wage, I am also concerned about your health care, right?
Yes.
I'm concerned about you being able to afford healthcare, you being able to afford, a hospital visit, something like that, because unfortunately, our country is the country where people go bankrupt because of medical bills.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put that aside and kind of now delve into your question. I'm going to put Maslow's hierarchy aside, and we're just going to put that in a vacuum. Um, with respect to that, this I think is where not just a trust, but also a last will and testament
Mm-hmm.
are critical. Remember what we talked about with a last will and testament, and how it's the only instrument by which you can designate what you want your disposition of remains to be.
Okay.
So if you're talking about a $50,000 life insurance policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
You and somebody is making minimum wage or even a little bit more than minimum wage, that $50,000 life insurance policy, and I have seen this too often, will get eaten up
Oh.
by funerals, right? And
Well,
so if you
you
if
have to
you
plan.
create
You have to plan.
if you create a will and you designate what your disposition of remains are, where those costs are going to come from.
Mm-hmm.
You can even buy a prepaid funeral if you want to make sure that you're frugal. Then that life insurance is is maintained. Those benefits are maintained. But I have seen far too often where unfortunately people pass away. They have a 25, $50,000 life insurance policy, and because they didn't have any other means, their family members had very scarce resources.
Mm-hmm.
They signed that life insurance policy over to the funeral home.
Yes, and you want to know something? Like a $10,000 life insurance policy um, will quickly get eaten right up. I think the average funeral costs, like on average, is about $7,000.
I've seen it just
I've seen
it
elaborate ones, but
depends.
I mean, if you want to
I
be modest.
I sometimes look at numbers and I'm like, okay, that could have been somebody's semester in college or a year, depending on where they're going, right? So it, like you said, you have to plan ahead, and God bless our elders because they're the ones who like, I already have this part taken care of. So, and I've got a few life insurance policies, one for each grandchild. And it's like,
Oh, that's
oh
wonderful.
my God. It's so wonderful to hear that. And it's really important to pass that wisdom down, right? It's really, really important to pass that wisdom down, because we get the proceeds from the life insurance, but we don't understand how those proceeds from the life insurance were actually created and planned for us. You know, so yeah, so I think you're right. It's just we have there's a scarcity issue, scarcity mentality, scarcity issue, Maslow's hierarchy. When you're trying to pay bills, you know, $10 for life insurance is a lot. And so you have to kind of step back, take a deep breath, and think about the future. It's hard to think about the future when you're really focused on trying to, you know, keep yourself together in the present. But I always tell people, you know, use both the microscope and the telescope. Look at your life like that. Look at it from a microscopic level, then look at it using a telescope. Where do you want to see yourself? Where do you see your family in the future? A long way ahead. What are you doing now to take care of yourself and to take care of that?
I think this is amazing information. I hope it inspires people to plan. I hope it inspires people to decide to create generational wealth. I really hope that, because we are in a position to where our family members don't have to struggle in any way if we plan it out properly.
Exactly. There are so many, you know, we become afraid. We see what's going on with the pandemic, and there's so many things that we could do that don't take a lot of time. They take some thinking and they take some planning. But, you know, I always tell people it's important to plan and to do it right, and then you kind of then you ease the burden, right? The burden is kind of lifted from your shoulders. Clients say that all the time. It's like, oh my God, thank you. That I can now sleep at night. I can now actually think about the future, right? People don't generally like to do this, but they're like, oh, this is about death. This is about death. But as we go through the process, like you, they're like, no, actually, it's about helping my family and helping my grandchildren.
Mhm.
Actually, this is a good thing, you know? So,
You know what? I can get nerdy about a lot of things. I actually got really excited writing my will with my lawyer. I was He was like, "You're really happy." I was like, "Yes, I am," because I knew that certain things were going to be taken care of, and it wasn't going to go willy-nilly. I can tell you for sure, I did not work all of my life so that my things could go to the state.
hmm hmm
Absolutely not.
right, unintended beneficiaries. That's what I call them. If you don't plan properly, your beneficiaries are not just your children. It's lawyers, it's judges, it's the court, it's the treasurer. You know, it's a whole bunch of entities and folks who you had not intended to inherit from you, and sometimes it's folks you really do not want to inherit from you because you didn't plan. And maybe your your ex actually inherits from you, talking about life insurance, right? You don't change that policy.
Oh my, oh my, oh my.
Yes, so that as well. So it really is important. You can use a will to take care of your children, to take care of your memorial service and things like that. You can use a trust to take care of yourself if you become incapacitated, and your children, and build wealth, and avoid probate. Provide for future generations, eliminate debt, eliminate um, the panic that comes along. Just free your family, basically.
Yes, amazing. Where can they find you, Max? Because you've only given us, this was very informative, but you've only given us the tip of the iceberg. Where can they find you?
Oh, you can find me at www.maxelliottlaw.com. MAXELLIOTT law.com. Just Google Max Elliott Law. I'm there. You know, Chicago, New York, we're here, and we serve beneficiaries all over the states, even internationally. So if you've got a connection here, wherever you are, we can help. So.
This is so good. This is so very good. And I'm just wondering if for some reason someone's in a state where you don't serve, is it possible that you might have a good referral?
I might. I might. It depends on the state, but I tend to know a lot of a lot of my brethren and sisters in the estate planning world all over the states, so all over the country. So.
So good. I appreciate your wisdom so much. I can't wait to see what you have for us the next time.
Oh God, we covered a lot today.
Don't worry, I'll come up with more questions. Don't worry.
I'm sure you will. I'm sure you will. Well, thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, just keep planning and keep building, and we'll get everybody there, right?
Awesome. Thank you, family, for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.
Okay, bye.